Well, it has been a very busy NBA free agency, and joining me to break it all down is Mark Medina. Hey, Mark, thanks for catching up with me for a couple minutes.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's such an eventful time that is NBA free agency. Always a lot of things to unpack.
Listen, you called it, and there is a lot to talk about. And I've seen you've written a couple pieces for Sportsnaut, other outlets, kind of detailing some of the bigger storylines that we've seen so far. Let's start with the trade request for Damian Lillard because I loved what you wrote. You had a line in the piece that you wrote for Sportsnaut that basically said, even though Portland wanted to keep him, they spent the first day of free agency proving why they ultimately weren't going to be able to do so. Walk us through why Lillard ultimately decided to do this and whether anybody should be surprised that he did do this.
Yeah, well, look, Damian Lillard after the season ended made it clear that in his exit interviews that he didn't have any interest with necessarily playing with young players because in the context of his career at 32 years, he's wanting to make sure that he takes advantage of whatever championship window he has remaining. And so when you fast forward to the NBA draft where they used the number 3 pick to get Scoot Henderson instead of making a trade for an established player, I think that sent philosophical messages across the board of one, they're going to go young instead of trying to go all in. And two, when you look at Scoot Henderson, while he is an amazing talent, he plays the same position as Damian Lillard. And so, look, I don't think the Portland Trailblazers in their mind felt like, they're trying to push Damian Lillard out or they want to trade him. If it was up to them, they would keep him. But they're very much in the mode that they think they're much better off long term with investing in their young players as opposed to maybe going all in to get some veteran players. But I think the other, telltale sign was ironically the fact that the Portland Trailblazers retained Jeremy Grant. And maybe on the surface you think, oh, this is a move that Damian Lillard likes because he recruited him to come to the Blazers. They had really good chemistry. But given the cap number, where it was 5 years, you thought, okay, this is really the only major move that the Blazers are going to make and nothing else. And so with that, the writing on the wall seemed clear that they're not going to be another major player in free agency. And probably the best case scenario is for them to be, a competitive playoff team, but nothing else. But in fairness, that's what Damian Lillard had gone through before with going to the playoffs for 8 straight years, being the sneaky good playoff team with the exception of that Western Conference Finals appearance in 2019, they weren't really considered a team that could seriously contend for a title. Hence, Damian Lillard made it clear Saturday morning with his agent Aaron Goodwin that he wants out. So we'll see what happens moving forward.
Are you surprised that the fans have turned on him as quickly as they have? He mentioned something on Twitter about taking the high road being in his DNA and that he's always been very straightforward. He has been with the franchise for more than a decade. I mean, is that surprising to you at all?
Well, it's an interesting, I think, contrast. Because I think nationally, there's been a feeling that hey, this has been long overdue. Damian Lillard has been getting a lot of calls. Hey, why aren't you the latest superstar to either ask for a trade or form a super team right in your own backyard? And but I think with locally with Portland, look, this was a guy that they thought would be a Blazer for life. They've had a history of other past stars asking out for trades, a la a Clyde Drexler, a la a Bill Walton. So I think it just kind of reinforces that pain that no matter how much they mean to the franchise and they love the city, that's never quite enough. But look, I think that both parties have always had the right intentions. But if I'm looking at it objectively here, I think that Damian Lillard has given the front office a lot of chances to build good rosters around him. And don't get it twisted. It's not like he was never on good teams. He was on competitive playoff teams, but they were never able to get to that push where they were considered a serious contender. They're always about just improving on the margins. And look, in fairness to Portland, some of that's because of its small market disadvantages and that Portland's not considered a destination franchise. But when you're looking at this current context where they re-signed Jeremy Grant to a max extension when he's considered, a good player, but not a superstar player. And you don't go all in with your draft pick. I think that sends a message to Damian Lillard that it's going to kind of be more of the same.
As you wrote, and a lot of other writers have indicated, Portland is expected to honor the request, and his agent has said that Miami is his preferred destination. Maybe the Nets could be a second preferred destination if that doesn't work out. Are you expecting him to land with the Eastern Conference champs? Do you see another team that could potentially put enough together to get him there, incentivize him?
Yeah, it's a great question. It remains to be seen. Look, I know that Chris Haynes has reported that Damian Lillard wants to be with the Heat and no other team, but the early sense that I get from the Portland Trailblazers is they're going to look at it through the lens of what's best for their own interests. And maybe that's stating the obvious, but when you look at recent history with the Washington Wizards with Bradley Beal, partly because he had a no trade clause, they traded him to the Phoenix Suns because that's where Bradley Beal wanted to go. But also, the Wizards were in a different situation where they felt like they've been kind of spinning the hamster wheel going nowhere. They have a new front office, so they're ready to hit the reset button. With the Blazers, they don't want to do a rebuilding project. I remember asking Joe Cronin last season, hey, why not tear it all down to the studs? And he felt like, he said, hey, I don't think we have the appetite to do that. We still feel like we can be competitive with the roster that we have and whatever moves that we make moving forward. So that's very much the lens that the Blazers are going to evaluate a potential Damian Lillard trade. What can they get back in return? That might not be of equal value because it's very rare that you can do that. But what trade package can you get now at least ensure that they're considered a viable playoff team? And what that looks like, certainly Miami will be aggressive with that. But when you look at their role players, I don't know if that's really enough to Portland's satisfaction to pull the trigger on a Damian Lillard deal. And I think the other thing that we have to keep in mind, from what I've been relayed, Portland's comfortable with having to figure this out short or long term. So this very much could happen today, a few days from now, next week, or very much could carry over into later in the offseason or heaven forbid, even into training camp if Portland doesn't feel like they're going to get a trade that ensures that they have a chance to make the playoffs.
Because you and I have talked a lot about the pieces that Miami has and what they should do moving forward in order to just get over that hump of being able to actually win this championship. I'm assuming that if they were to bring Dame into the fold and if he does in fact want to go somewhere where a championship is on the table, to your exact point, that they wouldn't be able to break the entire thing apart. I mean, in theory, you would need some of those key players, a la Jimmy Butler and all these other guys.
Yeah, without a doubt. And you hit the crux here of what the challenge is, because when Damian Lillard's saying he wants to play with the Miami Heat, it's with the context of I want to play with Jimmy Butler, I want to play with Bam Adebayo, and the Miami Heat don't want to give up either of those players. But when you're looking at, what Miami's done, yeah, letting Gabe Vincent go to the Lakers was partly to kind of clear up the cap space in case Damian Lillard's available. But if I'm Portland, I'm not really interested in any of those other core guys. Maybe if you attach them in a deal that includes Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, but Miami's going to say no. So it very much could just be this back and forth. And because of that, it seems like there's a likely scenario that a third or fourth team has to get involved so that they can kind of trade the assets accordingly depending on team objectives. There's also a feeling that because of all the complexity with this, that whatever deal the Sixers do with James Harden, it's all going to be intertwined with a possible Damian Lillard deal. So this could involve three, four, five teams. I mean, I don't want to say 30, that would be a lot, but think multi-team trades, especially if both star players are involved in this huge deal.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up James Harden. I mean, we've seen this movie a couple of times now with him wanting to move around. So you think that ultimately he's going to get involved with this deal involving Dame Lillard and maybe Miami. Is there any way to forecast what the future holds for him?
Yeah, that is also an unknown for similar reasons. Because Philadelphia, they are looking at through the lens that not just will we make a trade that makes sure that we're in the playoff hunt, but to make sure that we have a chance to win an NBA championship because they still have Joel Embiid. And keep in mind, with Daryl Morey, historically he has shown a willingness to drag this out, make this awkward. Like with Ben Simmons, when he requested a trade, he did not make a deal, ironically, until leading into the trade deadline to get James Harden. because of their history in Houston. And so I think that that's what the Sixers are looking at through that lens. And really, the only reason why there's a feeling around the league that multiple teams are going to be involved in that James Harden and Damian Lillard will be part of the same deal is just because of all the complexities that both teams are very much drawing a line in the sand that we're not looking to rebuild and hit the reset button. And so because of that, the more teams you get involved, maybe it might be more complicated with understanding everything, but the easier pathway it could be with dispersing different assets, presumably because there could be teams that are looking to unload salary, are willing to absorb salary or collect draft picks, et cetera. So, yeah, welcome to NBA free agency. And I'm certainly glad I'm not a GM or a salary cap expert because it's a lot to untangle here.
And if you're a Harden fan or a Lillard fan, prepare for delayed gratification, I think is the sense I'm getting for you, that this thing might not be done as soon as people might like. You mentioned LA. What do you make of what they've done in free agency, and have they put themselves in position to contend in the West a little bit more?
I think so. Under the guise that, as we speak right now, free agency is still fluid. It technically just started, but the major dominoes outside of Damian Lillard and James Harden trades have mostly taken care of itself. So, with those caveats, I think that the Lakers won the free agency sweepstakes, and because of that, I would put them second in the Western Conference behind the Denver Nuggets, and certainly a team that could win an NBA championship. Look, the Lakers, they didn't need to go big game hunting and try to get a third star like the Lakers have traditionally done because of two reasons. They already have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and they also learned their lessons from the Russell Westbrook deal that sometimes it's better to just have two stars and a lot of good role players, right? And so ahead of time, the Lakers were very clear of what their priorities were. It was about maintaining continuity with retaining Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, D'Angelo Russell. They did that. Another objective was to add some more backcourt depth because they knew, practically speaking, maybe they can't keep D'Angelo, maybe they can't keep Dennis Schroeder. What else can they find in the market? They were able to keep D'Angelo, but they couldn't keep Dennis Schroeder because he got a much more lucrative deal from the Raptors than the Lakers could have even offered him because of salary cap rules. But you know what they did? They got Gabe Vincent from Miami. They got Cam Reddish. They got Teron Prince, a really good forward. So they have a lot of versatility. The other objective here that they had was, shoring up some of their backcourt depth. They retained Jared Vanderbilt. And so they have a lot of good size to complement Anthony Davis, just in case, heaven forbid, he gets hurt. And, also giving some additional rim protection here. And they're also able to do that without, really compromising their cap space. I should also add they got Jackson Hayes on the free agent market, who's a really good athletic big. And so when you're looking at all those things, they met their objectives and they also managed their cap really well because they had limited resources. Now, specifically with Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura, they could match any offer that they could give them, but they didn't want to go down that road too much. So they sent the early word out to several media members, including me, that they had full intentions with matching those offers. And you know what that did? I think that may have dissuaded certain teams from actually giving Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura some offers. And here's the reason: when you give an offer, even if the Lakers have full intention of retaining those players and have the right to do that, your cap space is being held for whatever amount of days before the Lakers would counteroffer. And so with that, that would prohibit those teams from making other moves in the meantime. And I think as much as Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura are really good players, other teams probably felt dissuaded, like, I'm not going to tie up my cap space for guys that I'm probably not going to get. And so with that, the Lakers met the objectives. And I think that even though LeBron James and Anthony Davis are a year older, and you never discount possibility of injuries because of LeBron's age and because of Anthony Davis's injury history, there is very much a pathway that they could be a better team even next season because they've had a full offseason of rest and they won't have as much of a workload both in the first half of the season because of Russell Westbrook's not great fit, as well as the second half of the season when they just had to play with Game 7 intensity just to climb back into the play-in tournament standings. So, yeah, A+ all across the board, and I still think the Nuggets would be the favorites because they're the defending champs and they still got most of their core outside of Bruce Brown back. But yeah, the Lakers are very much going to be a team that you have to take seriously in this championship contention race.
I don't want to keep you too much longer because I've kept you for a long time already, but I do want to touch on just a couple other teams and go back to the East. Just quickly, I mean, the Knicks, they let Obi Toppin go. I think he was a fan favorite around here, high lottery pick. They get Dante DiVincenzo back into the mix, but they're stockpiling this draft capital that could maybe, at least per the story that they'd like to tell, could be used to do something special in the future. What should Knicks fans be feeling about where this team is, what's possible for them? They're just desperate to expand beyond what their ceiling has been.
Yeah, well, I don't want to get Knicks fans' hopes up because they've been so experienced to heartbreak. But look, it feels like they're really and finally moving in the right direction because they've already had a great core to build around with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle. And, look, they challenged Miami in the second round, not quite enough. But I like the Dante DiVincenzo move. He has previous history with Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart playing in Villanova. He checks a lot of boxes as far as being a good three-point shooter, being a great defender, being a great kind of glue guy that can play with both the reserve and starting units. And as far as stockpiling picks and assets, that's kind of the name of the game in the NBA. And so I think that you have to look at through the lens of maybe this can help the Knicks make a move now or lean into the trade deadline next season. And so while I would handicap the Eastern Conference race right now to Milwaukee and Boston, you very much have to think that as of now, New York would be third, and they would have a fighter's chance to kind of scratch and claw their way into, really making themselves a viable contender to be reckoned with.
We won't jinx it until it happens because I think they're frustrated with results so far, although it was fun to see them make a deep playoff run. And as far as Milwaukee goes, Mark, how vital was it for them to sort of keep their core together if they are in fact going to continue to be contenders next season?
Oh, it's huge. And look, some of this isn't surprising. There was a very much large expectation that they were going to retain Chris Middleton and that he just opted out to get more years under his contract here. But there was a real fear that maybe Brooke Lopez goes to somewhere like Houston or somewhere else, and they might not be able to afford to keep him, but they were able to. And look, they underachieved last season, even though Giannis Antetokounmpo is saying, "Hey, we're not failures," right? The reality is they were a number one seed and they're expected to win a title, and they lost in the first round. But they have all the core pieces in place, and Adrian Griffin as a first-year head coach, I think this gives them a lot of momentum of obviously still having the talent around them, but there being even more buy-in and maybe some more tactical improvements than they would have experienced under Mike Budenholzer. So yeah, they're number one in the East, and I very much expect that they should get back to the NBA Finals.
It's fascinating to calculate the amount of money that has been committed in such a short period of time in NBA free agency. Which deals did you look at and your eyes kind of popped out of your head like, wow, this guy's being overpaid? Or, is there a player that we haven't discussed that you think has really landed in a place that suits them perfectly to make sort of a surprising run?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, philosophically, I've always reminded myself, like, look, this is monopoly money, and it's, certainly for us, it feels overwhelming, but it's all in line of the league's getting a lot more revenue, hence the pie is growing. And so under that context, the only head scratcher wasn't that he doesn't deserve the money, but more so of what the priorities were from Portland's end was Jeremy Grant, because as we were discussing before, it very much felt like kind of a short-term move that they thought would placate Damian Lillard, but in reality, it just signaled that they're not going to be a serious player in making, monumental moves in free agency that can get them to championship contention. So I thought if they were to retain Jeremy Grant at a lesser number and maybe fewer years, that would be a signal to Damian Lillard, hey, we're invested in you, and maybe it would go far for Damian Lillard because of their history together, but that there would be another major move on the horizon. But it seems like that's it.
And just lastly for you, Mark, Victor Wembanyama, with the team now, finally inking that deal. He joked that he spent more time talking to the media than talking to his teammates or, being on the court, which I don't envy him. I think he's being pulled in a lot of different directions ahead of Summer League. But what have your impressions been so far? And what do you expect from him as he gets set now to finally, hopefully, help do the job at hand?
Yeah, well, it seems like he's hitting all the right notes. He's getting dinner with the Spurs luminaries. It was just wild to see that photo where he's with David Robinson and Tim Duncan, some of the most dominant big men in NBA history, and they all of a sudden look like guards when they're standing next to Victor Wembanyama. But I think the other thing, what we should expect in Summer League, look, it's very clear that the Spurs are going to handle him with care. They already announced he wasn't going to be part of the California Classic in Sacramento, but he would be in Summer League in Vegas. But I think that he's going to play limited minutes at some point. They'll probably shut him down after a few games because they know it's all about making sure that his body is equipped for the full season his rookie year. But I think even his rookie season, there's a league-wide expectation that he's not going to play full 82 games and he's going to be load managed off the jump. But I think the clear distinction is this. There's not a feeling that, oh, he could be injury prone like a Zion Williamson, but there very much is an awareness that because of how tall he is and how, even though he's added strength, he still needs to add more strength, that they want to make sure that they're handling his workload the right way. But even with that, the expectation, at least from people that I talk to, is that he's going to make an instant impact. He already has all the skills to thrive in today's NBA. He's all about practicing and being coachable and loving the game and his teammates. But it's not going to be enough to make the playoffs because the reality is, barring the Spurs making any significant moves with trades, they have a mostly young roster. And so I think this season it's about the growing pains, seeing the growth, and kind of enjoying that. And then maybe next season and beyond is when it's about, okay, can they make the playoffs and above that?
You mentioned them being cautious with his body and the need to add strength. And it was interesting to hear him say, as such a young player, that he doesn't feel like he needs to do too much in that regard and doesn't understand why a slighter frame might not be something that could be to his benefit in the league. Who will ultimately make that call? I was thinking about this the other day. I know it's a little out of left field, but I mean, if he does need to continue to develop physically, or if it would be something of a rude awakening for him to play too many minutes, just coming into the league, where is that decision ultimately made?
I expect it'll be a collaborative decision with the Spurs and him. And I think that these two ideas aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. And what I mean by that is, I don't think that the Spurs or anyone else in the NBA is expecting that Victor Wembanyama is suddenly going to become a physical specimen and this huge elite big man that thrives on his physicality and defeats his opponent with power, like a Shaquille O'Neal, for example. His skill set's going to be his skill set, and that skill set's really good. He has point guard skills in a big man's body, and so the feeling is that is good enough in the short term as well as long term. That, you know what, you don't have to be this physical specimen. You could be a skilled player of being able to hit threes, dominate in the post, have a mid-range game, be a great passer. But I think where the physicality comes into play is more of having the durability and resiliency to withstand going up against other physical opponents, as well as managing the grind of an NBA season. So yeah, I think the expectation is, from at least people I talked around the league, that probably by year 3 is when he'll figure all those things out. So it will be a process, but they're not going to try to reinvent the wheel and make Victor Wembanyama into a player that he isn't.
Mark, have a great holiday. Thanks for the time. Hopefully talk to you sooner rather than later when some of these deals reveal themselves. I know we're in a bit of a holding pattern for now, but it's been an exciting free agency so far. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Hope you have a great holiday, and then little 4th of July. It always feels like there's some sort of fireworks with free agency or trades too, so we'll be ready.
Keep your phone handy. All right. Thanks, Mark.